Good evening, everyone. I'm Larry Kudlow. Welcome back to the Kudlow Report. The IRS scandal is heating up, and one of the key players, Republican Congressman Darrell Issa, had this to say about how high up this thing could go.
The administration is still their paid liar, their spokesperson, picture behind. He's still making up things about what happens and calling this local rogue. There's no indication. The reason that Lois Lerner tried to take the fifth is not because there's a rogue in Cincinnati. It's because this is a problem that was coordinated in all likelihood right out of Washington headquarters, and we're getting to proving it.
All right, let's talk about this whole thing and how high up the food chain we can say. Here now is Guy Benson. He's political editor for townhall.com. We welcome to the show Eliana Johnson, media editor with the National Review, and our distinguished co-host for the evening, AEI visiting scholar Ed Kennard, author of the best-selling book Unintended Consequences, and a former managing partner at Bain Capital. All right, Eliana, let me begin with you. You filed a story on NRO late this afternoon. You're pointing the finger at William Wilkins, the chief counsel of the IRS, who is a political appointee. Tell me about that.
Well, we don't know that Wilkins will be implicated in this scandal, but we do know that the more we know about the IRS scandal, Larry, the worse it gets for them. From their original explanation that this was a couple of rogue employees in Cincinnati, that has been completely exploded. First, this went up to Lois Lerner in D.C., the head of the exempt organization's National Review showed that a team of lawyers in the technical unit, known as tax law specialists, were guiding this all along. Now, today, we learn a source in the IRS gave us a partial list of the 88 computers that investigators are looking at. That includes the computers of IRS Chief Counsel William Wilkins, who's one of the two political appointees, aside from the IRS Commissioner in the Obama administration, his two deputies, and 14 other people in his office.
Why would they be looking at his computer? What do they know? First of all, who's doing the investigation? Is this the FBI?
This is...
Who's getting this computer?
There are several... We don't know which investigative committee asked to look at Wilkins' computer. There are several investigations going on right now. There's an investigation by the Oversight Committee, an investigation by the House Ways and Means Committee, an investigation by the Senate Finance Committee, and lastly, an investigation by the IRS itself. So there are 4 concurrent investigations going on right now, including a criminal investigation. Looking into whether there was any criminal wrongdoing in all of this. However, it is interesting that they're looking at one of the top figures in all of the IRS, as well as his deputies.
Yeah, Guy Benson, let's just stay with Wilkins for a moment. As Eliana has related, his computer is being looked at by whichever group is investigating it. He is an Obama appointee. He is also, according to Eliana's reporting, he is also formerly a lawyer for Reverend Jeremiah Wright of the Trinity United Church, defending an Obama speech years ago because there was a nonprofit and he got paid. What do you make of this Wilkins character? His name really hasn't come up yet.
It hasn't that much. He's also a former Democratic staffer on Capitol Hill, so he's a partisan Democrat. Not that that necessarily matters all that much, but what's interesting, too, about his position, if he's the chief counsel of the IRS, and let's say he knew about this dating back farther than the agency has let on, then the next question that logically follows is, well, if he's the chief counsel, who is he telling? Who is he talking to? As a top lawyer, you'd think he'd probably want to keep his bosses in.
He told Neil Wolin, the Deputy Treasury Secretary, I'm speculating here, but I know a little bit about how government works, having worked in there. He told Timothy Geithner, the former Treasury Secretary, and I'm going to believe that Wilkins went to the White House to tell the White House counsel, who then told the Chief of Staff, who then they say didn't tell Obama. But the point I want to ask you guys is there a lead here, or are we stopping out? In other words, is there a fence jump into the White House here, or do we stop at the IRS?
We don't know that yet, and we're going to have to wait and see what comes down. What we did find out today, Larry, the House Oversight Committee released transcripts, partial transcripts, of some of the depositions that they've held with lower-level IRS employees who are just taking to the woodshed all of the initial arguments and excuses offered up by their bosses that, remember, they originally said this was perhaps just 2 rogue employees in Cincinnati and it had nothing to do with political motivations. That was even in the IG report. Well, now we have evidence of people testifying on the ground from Cincinnati saying, no, 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 this was directed from Washington. They were at times micromanaging the projects, and we saw piece by piece that this was targeted towards the right.
Right, there's no question. Ed Kennard, are you satisfied, just looking at this piece, that this Cincinnati excuse is now gone, that is gone, that, in effect, the IRS Washington operation, at whatever level, and I'm not going to indict Wilkins yet, we don't know that, but certainly Washington was heavily involved. As somebody watching this, what do you think?
I think it's hard to believe that somebody higher up can't imagine that far. You can never trace it back that far, but I can't see how it's possible that it wouldn't go higher up. And part of the reason for that is that you just would be looking at statistical averages as a lawyer inside of the IRS and saying those are some of the things that the measures that determine whether you're discriminating or not. Those are commonly used measures. How would they not be looking at some of those statistics and not seeing that they were getting out of bounds in terms of normality? So I would think it has to go higher up than simply snafus at a low level.
All right, Eliana, your reporting doesn't yet take it into the White House. I want to make that clear. I mean, I'm looking at this. We all have our biases, but I just want to say, you're really heavily inside the IRS. You're talking to Cincinnati people who said they were micromanaged by Washington people and that there were half a dozen offices around the country involved. Is that true? Is that fair?
I would add two things to the way that you characterized what I've reported. The first is that we have IRS employees in Cincinnati saying that they were basically browbeaten by Washington in order to follow their directions and to give them cases. So
is this the 7 cases that they were asked to provide? Is that what you're talking about?
Exactly. And the way that
and that request came from Washington.
Absolutely. And they were asking for very specific cases to be handed to them.
Why would they do that? Why?
I think they perhaps wanted to look at what specific Tea Party groups were doing and manage specific Tea Party cases, if the transcripts are to be believed.
Questions, players, donors.
Exactly. And one employee said that he or she was so fed up and disgusted by this practice that he was applying for other jobs.
Changed job.
As early as 2010. The other thing I would add is that William Wilkins did visit the White House during this period. And we need to know what happened.
When did he visit? When did he visit? Do we know?
The White House. I have in my notes here. Wilkins visited the White House in December of 2010. He had a meeting with the president. In December of 2011, he had a meeting with the president, and he had 2 other meetings in late 2011 with deputies to the president. Subpoena those guys. We need to know what happened in those meetings, given what we know now. So we can't say that we know this doesn't go to the White House.
Guy Benson, I think Eliana makes a good point. Guy, I want him subpoenaed. I don't know how, where, when, why, but they should all be subpoenaed with the threat of grand jury, with the threat of criminal action, every single one of them. I want to go up the ladder. I want to know what Stephanie Cutter knew, for example. I want to know what Rob Neighbors knew. He was the legislative senior guy in the White House. I want to know what Wilkins knew. I don't see how you can do this without subpoenaing them, Guy.
You're probably right, and we might get to that point at some stage of this game. Of course, even subpoenaing them and getting to come before Congress is no guarantee that they'll say anything, as we learned from Lois
Yeah, but
Lerner.
a special counsel can use a grand jury. That's the thing. I want the Congress to do its job. I have no problem with that. But I'm just saying, at some point, impaneling a grand jury raises the level of seriousness for all these players, and they will have to talk.
I think that's probably right, although I think that the point that the Wall Street Journal editorial board made last week is very well taken, which is if you jump into a special prosecutor, then that gives an excuse for political obfuscation from the administration, hiding behind the ongoing investigation. And the purpose of the special prosecutor isn't political accountability, it's legal accountability, and we really need both in this case.
I think you can get both on that. I didn't agree with that article. I myself have come out for special counsel along with Peggy Noonan and some other people, because I think you can have your cake and eat it too. But we will see. We will see. Anyway, thanks, Guy Benson. We appreciate it. Ed Kennard is staying with us for the entire show. Eliana Johnson is going to return later on in the program. Now, for another big story tonight, New Jersey Governor Chris Christie has a chance to make a big impact, not only in his state, but on national politics as well. Who's he going to choose to replace Democrat Senator Frank Lautenberg?